Are you secretly terrified that you will be forced to work until you're 80 years old because you started saving too late and are currently drowning in endless monthly payments? The truth is, most of us were never taught how money actually works at the kitchen table when we were young, leaving us to figure it out the hard way while getting crushed by 20% credit card interest rates and crippling consumer debt. But what if I told you that building true wealth and retiring as a multimillionaire doesn't require a massive salary or a superpower? Just time and a few mathematically certain rules. In 10 Things Nobody Told Me About Money, we break down the exact life lessons you need to stop the debt spiral, take back your financial freedom, and ensure your family is completely taken care of. Click and listen right now to discover the simple financial playbook you wish someone had handed you 20 years ago, because it is never too late to do the right thing and change your life.
You know, it really is a profound realization when you just step back and look at the core mechanics of wealth. The central thesis of Brad Weaver's book is, well, it's incredibly empowering, but honestly, it can be a little intimidating too.
Yeah, I totally get that. Money usually is.
Right. And the underlying philosophy here is that time basically operates as your ultimate superpower, but simultaneously it's your absolute kryptonite, because time is just completely apathetic.
Apathetic. Like, it just doesn't care.
Exactly. It doesn't care if you're making, brilliant financial choices or disastrous ones. It just simply compounds whatever decisions you're making today. So our mission for this deep dive is to basically act as a financial time machine for you.
I love that. A time machine.
Yeah. We want to sit you down at that metaphorical kitchen table and provide the foundational financial guidance you probably missed out on growing up.
Which is so needed, because for most of our parents, and certainly their parents' money, was just this completely taboo subject.
Oh, absolutely.
You just didn't discuss salaries. You didn't talk about mortgages. It was just mind your business, go to work, and hope it works out. And we all had to learn by trial and error.
And error in the financial world is devastatingly expensive.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So we're going to build this architecture from the ground up, starting with the most fundamental block. Lesson 1. The secret millionaire maker habit, which revolves entirely around monthly budgets.
Right. And the foundation of building wealth, according to the book, rests on a very simple mathematical reality. You just have to spend less money than you bring in.
Sounds easy on paper, right?
Right. But the mechanism for doing it is creating what the author calls a $0 budget. It's not just looking at your bank account and guessing. Every single dollar you earn is assigned a specific job before the month even begins.
I think the behavioral psychology behind this is what makes it so effective, right? Because he connects this modern $0 concept to his mother's old school envelope system.
Yes. Decades ago, people literally put physical cash into little white paper envelopes. They'd label them like groceries, vacation, or Christmas.
And when the Christmas envelope was empty, you stopped buying presents. Period.
Exactly. You couldn't overspend because the physical reality of an empty envelope just stopped you in your tracks. Today, we've digitized that friction.
Sinking funds, right?
Yeah, exactly. The modern equivalent is setting up automated transfers from your checking account into multiple different savings accounts, which, the financial world calls sinking funds.
Sure.
You create a digital envelope for car repairs, one for holidays, one for property taxes.
So you're anticipating inevitable expenses rather than like constantly living in a state of reaction.
Precisely.
Okay, but let's unpack this for a second, because I know exactly how this sounds to someone hearing it for the first time. A budget sounds, well, exactly like a financial diet. Doesn't that just feel incredibly restrictive?
Yeah.
Like you finally get a good job, you're making decent money, and now you have to meticulously track every dollar. Doesn't a budget kill all the actual fun of making money?
That is the knee-jerk reaction most people have. But the reality of the $0 budget is actually the exact opposite. A budget doesn't restrict your freedom, it manufactures it.
Wait, how does it manufacture freedom?
By generating what financial planners call margin. Margin is the breathing room. It's the actual cash left over after all your baseline obligations are met.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the book suggests a really radical move here. If you're drowning in consumer debt, you pause your investing temporarily. Just for a short time. You take every spare dollar from that budget and throw it at the debt to just kill it off.
And then once that monthly debt payment is gone, your margin just explodes.
Exactly. You suddenly have hundreds, maybe thousands of unassigned dollars every month. So a $0 budget is essentially permission to spend without guilt.
So if you assign $300 to a dining out fund, You can spend every penny of that without anxiety.
Because you mathematically know the electricity bill and the retirement fund are already fully funded.
Oh, wow. That reframes the whole concept. It shifts the budget from a cage to a tool that just reduces your cognitive load. You aren't stressing at the restaurant because the decision was already made on the first of the month.
Right. And once you have that massive margin from a tight budget, what do you do with it? You put time to work for you.
Which brings us perfectly to the next point. Lesson 2. Why you must start investing today and not tomorrow.
Yes. The math behind compound interest isn't just like a slight advantage. It is a staggering force of nature.
I mean, the book highlights this principle called the Rule of 72. Yeah.
If you take the number 72 and divide it by your expected annual rate of return, so let's use the historical average of 10% in the stock market, your money will double roughly every 7.2 years without you lifting a finger.
Without you doing anything.
Right. And that 7.2-year doubling cycle is the exact mechanism that makes time your superpower. Let's look at this specific math from the text because it fundamentally alters how you view time.
Yeah, break down the numbers for us.
Okay, let's say you invest $500 a month starting at age 25, and you maintain that discipline every month until you hit 65. Assuming that 10% average return, you will retire with roughly $3 million.
So you become a multi-millionaire on just $500 a month.
Exactly. But, and here is the kryptonite side of time. Let's say you put it off. You want to travel in your 20s, you want a nice car, you think, I have plenty of time.
Which is what everyone thinks in their 20s.
Right. So you wait exactly 15 years and start investing that exact same $500 a month at age 40. By the time you hit 65, you will only have about $600,000.
Oh, man. That is a total gut punch. Waiting just 15 years doesn't just cost you the $90,000 you didn't invest. It costs you $2.4 million in lost growth.
It's massive.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Delaying your investing is basically like trying to grow a massive oak tree, but waiting until you actively need the shade to plant the acorn.
That is a perfect analogy. You can't just throw massive amounts of cash at the problem in your 50s and expect the same results. The math requires the decades for the snowball to gain momentum.
And that explains the underlying anxiety so many people feel about retirement, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They're trying to plant the acorn at age 55. Now, to be clear, it is never too late to start, and $600,000 is infinitely better than zero, but time does the heavy lifting so your wallet doesn't have to.
Which leads right into the mechanics of where this margin should actually go. Lesson 3, the ultimate retirement flywheel, focusing on Roth IRAs and index funds.
Right, so the author recommends aiming to invest 15% of your gross income, but we really need to define what investing actually means here.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people assume that if money is just sitting in a savings account, it's doing its job.
That is a critical point. We have to separate the concept of saving from investing. If you just save that $500 a month under your mattress, or even in a high-yield savings account for 40 years, you only accumulate about $240,000.
So by choosing safety, you're actively missing out on over $2.7 million of compounding wealth.
Exactly. The money must be exposed to the market. And the author highly recommends a specific vehicle called a Roth IRA.
Okay, explain the mechanics of a Roth IRA for us.
So it's funded with after-tax money. You've already paid your income tax on the money going in. And because the government has already taken its cut, the money inside that account grows completely tax-free.
Wait, completely?
Completely. When you withdraw it after age 59 and a half, you don't pay a single dime in taxes on the millions of dollars of growth. Plus, if a catastrophe happens, you can actually withdraw your original contributions. Not the growth, but the principal penalty-free at any time.
That's huge. But I really want to highlight a massive pitfall the book points out here, because it's a tragic mistake people make constantly.
Oh, the cash sweep account trap.
Yes. Funding a Roth IRA is not actually investing. A Roth IRA is just a tax classification. It's basically a bucket.
Right.
If you transfer money from checking to your Roth IRA, it just sits in cash, doing absolutely nothing. You have to actively log in, take that cash, and buy index funds, like the S&P 500 or VOO.
Yeah, to use a real estate analogy, opening the Roth is just buying the empty plot of land. Buying the index fund is actually planting the seeds. If you don't buy the funds, you're going to wake up in 30 years and wonder why your money didn't multiply.
Exactly. So the index fund is the actual engine.
Yep. When you buy an S&P 500 index fund, You aren't trying to pick one winning stock. You're buying tiny fractional slices of the 500 largest, most profitable companies in America.
So the math is proven, the tools are accessible. Why isn't everyone walking around as a multimillionaire?
Because there are entire industries designed to siphon that wealth away from you before you can even invest it.
Which brings us to the destroyer of the flywheel. Lesson 4, the credit card trap and why we need to stop digging the debt hole.
The statistics shared in this book are just grim. Currently, 48% of Americans carry a credit card balance from month to month.
Almost half the country.
Right. And credit card interest averages over 20% right now. Plus, 43% of people have missed at least one payment in the past 5 years.
The author references Benjamin Franklin here, right? A small leak can sink a great ship.
Yes. We often think financial ruin comes from, like, buying a mansion we can't afford. But it's usually just stacking up subscriptions, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, that quietly bleeds over $1,000 a year from your wealth.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here. Because I used to play the airline miles game religiously.
Oh, the points game.
Yeah. I genuinely thought I was beating the system. The argument is, I put everything on my card for the points, but I pay it off every month. If I'm not paying interest, aren't I getting free flights from the bank?
It definitely feels like free money. But this raises a really important question about behavioral data. The author, echoing Dave Ramsey, aggressively points out that banks build multi-billion-dollar skyscrapers funded entirely by your points.
Because we aren't as smart as we think we are.
Exactly. Credit cards act as an anesthetic. When you hand over a $100 bill, the pain centers in your brain actually light up. You register a loss.
Wow, really? The actual pain centers?
Yes. But when you swipe plastic or tap your phone, that neurological friction is completely gone. Studies show people spend 15 to 20% more when using plastic simply because it doesn't feel real.
Oh man, so you might get 2% cash back, but you overspent by 15% just to get it.
Right, and they're just waiting for life to happen. You might pay it off perfectly for 3 years, but then the car transmission blows or a medical emergency hits, and suddenly you're carrying that debt at 21% interest.
And that interest wipes out the value of a free flight in a matter of weeks.
Precisely. And it extends to those deceptive 0% financing traps, too, like buying a couch with no interest for 36 months.
Oh, I've seen those. They sound like a smart way to leverage money.
They do, but the fine print is a trapdoor. If you miss the payoff date by one single day or miss one minimum payment, you get hit with massive retroactive interest going all the way back to the day you bought it.
So you're basically playing against a casino, and the house always wins.
Always.
So the fundamental rule here is blunt. If you can't afford to pay cash for it, you can't afford it. Period. Which brings us to, arguably, the largest piece of socially acceptable debt out there.
The car payment?
Yep. Lesson 5. Why new cars keep you poor? Buy used and pay cash. We talked about the normalization of monthly payments, and it's so destructive in the auto industry.
The average car payment is hovering around $750 a month right now.
$750, that's a multi-million-dollar retirement contribution, just vanishing into an asset guaranteed to lose value.
Right, because the depreciation curve on a new vehicle is financially brutal. You lose roughly 20% of the vehicle's value the absolute second the tires roll off the dealership lot.
Just instantly gone.
Instantly. It transforms from a new car to a used car. And after 4 years, it's lost about 40% of its initial value.
The author shares a really painful personal example of this, doesn't he?
Yeah, he financed a brand new car for $45,000. He locked himself into a $600 monthly payment for 72 months. That is 6 years of his financial life tied to a depreciating block of steel.
And the contrast he gives is amazing. Later on, he bought a fully loaded, slightly used Ford Explorer. It only had 14,000 miles on it, but he got it for $31,000.
Right, a $19,000 discount just because it was a couple of years old. He let the first owner take that massive depreciation hit.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly how millionaires operate. They buy used cars and pay cash until they are millionaires.
Exactly. And the expert strictly warns against leasing, too. Leasing is marketed as getting more car for less money, but you're just signing up for an endless cycle of payments where you build zero equity.
Right. If an emergency hits, you can't sell a leased car to get liquid cash. You're legally trapped. Okay, so no high-interest credit cards, no financing new cars. But what about housing?
Ah, the ultimate sacred cow.
Exactly. Lesson 6. The 15-year mortgage rule. Never buy a house without it. This completely challenges the societal norm because the 30-year mortgage is the default setting for everyone.
It is, but the book sets a hard rule here. If you can't afford the 15-year payment, you can't afford the house.
Wait, so what does this all mean? Because a 30-year mortgage lowers my monthly payment right now. Doesn't that give me more cash flow to live my life?
That's the illusion. The 30-year mortgage is a trap that forces you to pay tens, if not hundreds, of thousands of dollars more in pure interest. In the first decade of a 30-year loan, the vast majority of your payment is going straight to the bank's profit column.
You're barely chipping away at the actual principal.
Exactly. The author actually started with a 30-year, realized how much wealth he was burning, and refinanced to a 15-year. Eventually, he even dropped it to a 10-year at 2.3%.
Wow. So yes, the 15-year requires a tighter budget initially, but you eventually eliminate your largest living expense right in your prime earning years.
Imagine hitting your early 40s or 50s, and suddenly your housing cost drops to zero. You free up massive monthly cash flow to supercharge your investments or upgrade your lifestyle.
So a 30-year keeps you a servant to the lender, but a 15-year buys your freedom decades early.
Precisely.
But let's be pragmatic. Life is wildly expensive right now. How do we fund these investments and cash purchases when there's no margin left? Which brings us to our final point. Lesson 9, beat inflation with a cha-ching side hustle.
Right, because up to this point, we've basically been playing defense. Budgeting, avoiding debt, those plug the leaks. But you can only cut a budget so much.
You have to shift to an offensive posture.
Exactly. You need to actively increase your income. And the math here is encouraging. Earning just an extra $100 a week, walking dogs, freelance tutoring, is $4,800 a year.
And that $4,800 is the exact breathing room you need to hit your 15% investment goals without feeling deprived.
And the author notes you should use cash for small purchases to avoid credit card fees, saving every single dollar of that side hustle money.
It totally shifts your psychology from scarcity to abundance.
Yeah.
You become the architect of your money.
You really do. I want to leave you with a final provocative thought from the book. Think about what you would urgently tell your younger self if you had a time machine.
Probably to stop buying dumb things to impress people.
Right. Well, you might not have a time machine to fix the past, but right now you are the younger self of the person you will be in 20 years. What decision can you make today that your future self will thank you for?
That is powerful. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, follow up in the next video.